Hello, it is Writing Wednesday, and today is, it's, I believe, the last day of February, and it's been, this is my sixth Writing Wednesday video. Welcome to the Bat Cave. This is where it all happens, and answering questions today about writing. I'm taking live questions, and I also have questions that I've been culling from the comments section throughout the week. So let's start with a question about development of character. Leanne Krantz had asked about developing my Ingrid character in White Oleander, which had started as a short story. Things find their form in writing. So I had started with a short story that was sort of black comedy, or I thought it was very funny, about an intractable person, really demanding person who eventually threatens a boyfriend who dumps her unceremoniously. And it was sort of a love revenge comedy. But people hated my character. They hated her. And they said, give her a coworker, give her somebody that we can be in the story. And I gave her a daughter. And then it wasn't funny anymore. There was, I wrote the story from Astrid's point of view, and finally there is a murder, which doesn't happen in the short story. There's just the suspicion that there's been a murder. It opens and closes in the same place, on the rooftop, in the wind, the daughter wondering whether she's really killed this guy and what's going to happen next. It was only when when I decided to write the book, I had to decide what would happen to the daughter. So the question is about the development of Ingrid's character. Well, Ingrid is, many of you are writers, already writing, and you know the tug between wanting to do your art and the demands of everyday life. And many, many of us have a part of ourselves that is an Ingrid, and I certainly do, because it obviously came from somewhere, of just wanting to do your work, and the fury of having to deal with the rest of reality is really, really a challenge. Artists face this all the time, and parents of young children especially, have a terrible time with this. I just finished Louise Nevelson's Louise Nevelson biography, A Passionate Life. And Nevelson she was a terrible mother, because all she wanted to do was to do her art, and it was really a struggle for her just to be in her own imagination, in her own world. And I have to admit, it's a dance for any artist to live in the imagination, to just crave the time to devote to your own work, and have to deal with the realities of everyday life and the lives of people around you. And how do you meet the internal demands of art against the demands of the world? Everybody has to make their own accommodation to that. I always think of it as a dance. For myself, there were times that my family and friends need more from me, and there are times that I need more. And so sometimes I'm more involved in what goes on in other people's lives, and sometimes it's time for my art, and I'm pretty ferocious about it. Some people don't like that. Of course, especially children, they want only 100% of your time and attention. So any time taken away from them makes you a bad mother. So be it. Now then there's Ingrid, who is the pure artist and just does not want to deal with her daughter's needs. There's a savage part of myself, that's definitely like that. Nevelson, oh wow, reading that biography, the struggle just to keep her own focus. And you sacrifice, art is sacrifice, art is choices. You can't do it all. It's hard to have a beautiful, rich life and take care of everybody else and produce incredible art. You have to have some sort of a value system where you're deciding what is what. So Ingrid, various characters, you take pieces of yourself and you give them certain traits. We talked about character the first day. You give all of your artistic self-centeredness, that savagery that it takes to produce something good. They gave it all to one character, and what happens? We have Ingrid, who murders somebody. There's that said, there is something about being an artist that requires certain sacrifices, not only from yourself but other people. And some people are not prepared to make those sacrifices. They feel that they have to give everybody everything they want at all times, and they end up not being able to pursue their art. Or maybe they wait until later life and try to get something started in their 50s, 60s, 70s. It can be done, but there is a certain level of egotism that has to do not so much with egotism about me and glorious me, who cares about me? I don't care about me. But the egotism that says, only I can do this, my kid can make her own macaroni and cheese. Somebody else can drive you to see some crappy Disney movie. But, your art is only you can do it. Now, it's easier when you have publications and people start to see results. The difficulty is before you start to see results, and people don't treat you well. They think, if you're at home writing, that they can call you in the middle of the day, you want to go have lunch, blah, 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 no lunch. No lunch, I'm not picking up your kid, I'm not picking up your laundry, I'm not cleaning the house, I am doing my work. And a lot of clearing space to be a writer is that you have to teach people to respect you, even your children. That this is, and you can't do it by telling them to respect you. You have to do it by working really hard so that they can see, is it worth pulling this person out of that level of concentration to deal with my, fix the TV or something. No, that person is going to be really upset if I bother them right now. But you have to exhibit that level of concentration or you don't get the respect. So that has to do with your mate, that has to do with your kids, that has to do with your friends. You have to train them not to disturb you when you have that mad look in your eye. Sometimes even sitting at the table, I remember my daughter, and not even remember, it still happens. She'll be talking to me, and suddenly she'll be saying, and the monkeys descended, into my brain. And I realize that she recognizes that I am not listening to her. I am totally still thinking about my writing. And that's just part of our lives. You know, I spend more time internally than I do spend in the outer world. No lunches, no interruptions. I don't know what's on television. I just work. And I don't, there's not going to be pictures of me on Facebook swimming in a Caribbean sea and all that. I mean, I work. Writing is work. And there are a lot of questions that I've gotten about how do you stay focused, how do you stay on track, how do you structure your day, and so much of it is just how much time and how deep your attention can be. Anybody can take my kid to see some movie, but only I can feed my work. Nobody can do that for me. So, I feel the pull, that I have to keep that going, keep that alive. Let's see what else we were asked here. A day in the life. How do I organize time, balance schedule? This is always, and then how do you do it when your daughter was young? You work all the time. If you have little kids, baby swing, I put them in there, the D batteries, that'll go for 45 minutes, they go to sleep, and you work like mad. You can hire a mother's helper babysitter, which is another kid, like a junior high kid, to amuse your kid while you're there and, keep them from disturbing you. My day is I work, I work all the time. For me, I don't get inspired unless I'm working. The muse favors the working writer. If I sat around and waited for inspiration, I would never do anything. But I work, I have a certain level of craft, which I'm always working at, and then sometimes the angels sing, and you get into a role, riff, and it's just beautiful. But that doesn't always happen. But it never happens unless I'm working. I don't get ideas while I'm doing other things, shopping or, taking a shower. No. Let's see. How you organize your research and notes. Methods of keeping organized for completing a long project. I use Scrivener to collect my notes. If you haven't used Scrivener, it's a brilliant program. You can also do early drafts I did an early draft of my novel on Scrivener, but because you can't send it directly from Scrivener, you have to put it into Word to send it out. I only use it for one draft because I don't like that transfer process. It's a pain in the butt. But my research, I still keep on Scrivener because it's very, very easy to toggle between what you're writing and go back to your research, find photographs, find notes. For the historical novel, it was a godsend. In the old days, we would keep files, small index card files with notes, but it's never the same as being able to instantaneously flip back and forth. You can keep websites in there. You can keep photographs in the same place that you keep your notes. Really recommend Scrivener. I believe in life management. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there's a time management book that's called it's got the worst, most boring cover, but it's like how to maintain your life, so your time, how to manage your time so that you can have more life, or something like that. But it had the best thing. What it did was you folded a paper, and I know this is mirror image, so that's kind of a tough one. The upper left-hand corner, you write things that you have to do that are both important and urgent. And urgent means there's a time, tick, 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 I've got to do it. Important means that in some way connects to your big project, something that, your real goals. Like in life, we only have a few goals. And if writing is one of them, getting that book done, getting that short story collection, getting stories out, finishing things, then important things will relate to your writing. Urgent things are, the washing machine's broken, the roof needs fixing, the garden doesn't look so good, you've got to get pills for the dog, whatever. So the upper left-hand corner is things that are important and urgent. The upper right-hand corner is for things that are urgent but not important. Okay, so important and urgent, getting that chapter to your editor. Important and urgent. Having that research meeting. Urgent but not important. The dog's pill, going to the market, doing the laundry, dealing with your friend's crisis. Although friends are usually pretty important too, but urgent and not important, picking up the dry cleaning, blah, blah, blah. Then the most important square is lower left. And the lower left corner is important but not urgent. And that's all the things you need to do for your writing. If you pay attention to important but not urgent, and make sure every day you take some steps to pursue your larger goals, your life will come with you. You will not get stuck in the urgent but not important, and also the urgent important, but especially urgent not important. And you will take care that your dreams keep moving forward. Never forget that one, not urgent but important. And then the final one we spent a lot of time into is not urgent, not important, which is goofing around, watching television, all that kind of stuff. Just procrastinating. Don't spend too much time there. Watch the time that you spend with urgent but not important. See if you can, not have such an elaborate garden. See if you can put off some of that stuff that you think is urgent, and make sure to take care of urgent but not important. Important but not urgent. And you'll find your writing continues. I use, for procrastination, anybody have problems with that? I use this. This is like top secret. They find that people work better in short bursts, right? So instead of saying, oh my God, I've got to write this chapter, and I've got the mail, and I've got email, and I've got all these decisions to make that I've been putting off, what I want to do about, for me, do I want to teach? Do I want to come and do something with this? Do I want to go to the party? All these decisions. And when I think of all the things I have to do, they just they come in, they drop in on me, and I can't do anything because everything's trying to get through the door at the same time. So I end up not doing anything and getting really depressed. What you do in this time management system, the same guy as this, how to control your time so that you can enjoy your life. It has a name like that. What I do is I make the things I have to do, I divide them in categories. So there's the writing, there's reading, which I have to do every day. That's part of my important but not urgent. Writing, reading, I write in a journal, I have email to take care of, I have phone calls to take care of, I have errands, okay? So I'll divide usually into 4 columns and put errands off for a big block. I just go out of the house and do that. So first you start 15 minutes, write for 15, read for 15, journal for 15, take care of emails, making decisions for 15. Then you come back and you do 20 of each. And then you come back and do 30 of each, and your concentration continues to get tighter. And you don't allow yourself to go look in the fridge and wander around. You know, you really, that timer goes off, you go on to the next thing, and then you come back around and you find you get everything done. And if the writing catches in any one of those rounds, the hell with the rest, because that's the most important thing. What it does is, when I feel a little when I feel like, procrastination tempting me, it's a fear. So when I feel that procrastination, I'll do this, and because I think, I can, for 15 minutes, I'll sit down for 15 minutes. I can do that. And if that opens up and I end up working 3 hours, so what? So be it. That's good. So I use the timer. It is the best defense against any kind of blocks. I love the timer. It's also really good if, when grandma calls, you can put the timer. I'll spend 20 minutes talking to grandma, but that's it. Or, 10 minutes talking to whoever. And you just set the timer, and when it goes off, okay, borrowed time now. So I do a lot of work with the timer. Let's see, any questions here? Here was one. Well, I've got a bunch here, but feel free to ask questions. So the whole life family balance, urgent, watch out for spending too much time in the urgent, not important, and make sure that you make progress in your important but not urgent sector, like every day. You'll feel alive. So computer or handwritten, I certainly am. The computer was made for me. I have terrible handwriting. But when I get stuck, or I really need to hear the character, I'll go and sit over there on my couch, which every writer needs a couch. There's mine. I took the closet out of my office and put a couch in there, bench seat with a cushion, and I'll go over there and I'll take a pad of paper and a pen, and I'll just write down, write by hand, and that I get to things that I wouldn't be able to get to otherwise. So you're always changing it up to get to other things. How to remain calm and serene after sending out a query letter. Calm and serene. That's hardly my... I'm not very calm and serene. You just keep working, keep working, center on your own project. What do I think of writing retreats? I do writing. I'm not the kind of person who seems to get accepted to things when I apply to things. Maybe I'm just a black pessimist, but I don't wait for somebody to invite me to a writing retreat. I try to find a way to get away, especially if life is, if there are big life events that I'm having to deal with, very demanding personal problems. The work has to continue. So I'll go and stay in somebody's basement. I'll go to the woods and, I'll rent a cabin. You make it for yourself. If you have an undemanding family member who lives in some boring place, that you can stay in the guest room and work, and they can make you dinner, they can feed you. Oh my God. I mean, that is priceless. You don't have to go to Paris to write. In fact, that's called a vacation. It's much better to go somewhere, that you can just concentrate. I like the mountains myself. I'm not, beach always feels more vacation-y to me. Any place with bad weather is always good. Where's the line between giving yourself to character and being the evil monster of being disturbed? There's no hard and fast line to that. That's a pretty natural reaction when you are concentrating really hard, not to snap at somebody who interrupts you. My family is well aware of that level of concentration where I don't even hear them at first. Luckily, my husband's a writer as well, and he's pretty self-contained, so he doesn't do it much. My ex used to stand in the doorway and natter at me, and I learned to wear headphones while I was working. Yeah, it's you just narrow out time. Some people like to have a little bit of noise around them, and they work in a cafe. Some people like to work at the library. I don't like the library because I can't have my coffee. I'd much rather pay my exorbitant, price for a cup of coffee and sit in a coffee house somewhere. But usually this is my space. When I come up here to work, I know what I'm doing, which is working. This is my lair. This is the bat cave. I've always worked in this room ever since I moved in this house about 30 years ago. The room has changed, but it's always the same place. And there have been times that I couldn't even walk in the front door. I had to work in the dining room because just the dread, the vibe was just too intense. And sometimes a little redecorating helps clear out the chi, fill some more chi, refresh the space. Let's see. Do I find people watching useful? I love people watching. I use my writer's notebook, and I don't just watch them. The thing about being an artist is you have to engage with reality and not just absorb, not just passively observe, but always pull it through. Whatever you're reading, whatever you're seeing, pull it through, right? Try to describe it. Challenge. So I love people watching, and I love trying to imagine who they are, but also simply how do you describe a human form? How do you describe the light falling on a person? How do you describe light falling on the folds of their clothing, the shape of a nose, the feeling of their demeanor. Look at how people are sitting. Notice gestures, and as you do that, keep them in your transfer them to your writer's notebook, the big notebooks, so that when you're working on a character in 2 years, you have wonderful gestures. You have, where do they put their weight? Is it back? Is it forward? Are they twitching? Are they kicking their foot? Rotating their ankle? Different kind of gestures and physical motions are so useful. Somebody asked me about dialogue, and when you do dialogue, often the silence is more interesting than people talking. So notice what people are doing in the silence. You can use these gestures. I have pages and pages and pages of them that I've gotten from people watching. So very, very useful. Let's see, anybody? Okay, let's see. So dialogue. We had a question about dialogue from Christy this week. Let's see if I can find her. Dialogue in a scene. Try to think of dialogue not as people talking, but as a scene in which people are talking. So don't think about dialogue like the utterance. The utterance is like the smallest part of a dialogue scene. There's gesture, there's still landscape. People don't stop talking and suddenly there's a world, the world doesn't disappear when people start talking. It continues to exist. So when people stop talking, you can hear things. We talked a little bit about how senses are used. The world continues, thought continues. People watch the person they're talking to, and they're always getting information from that person. They're watching for gestures. If anybody has ever talked about, anybody's ever traveled in a country where you don't speak the language, notice that you can be understood and understand other people, that you do not speak a word of their language, because something like 70-80% of human interaction is nonverbal. You are watching for cues. Now, how come that doesn't exist in your writing? How come people never have expressions? How come you're not characterizing their voice? How come they have no gestures? Keep thinking, what if this scene had nobody talking? Or if I'm writing in a language that I don't even understand, I should still understand what's going on. So dialogue, a dialogue scene, when people speak, it focuses down to the moment that is the present moment of your story. So when you want to cover big areas of time, you write the narrative. It's only when you close into the moment that people need to say anything. Dialogue is only for conflict. So if you are buying donuts, there's no reason to have any dialogue with the donut man. Save it for conflict, for a need to have conflict, and don't start the conversation until the moment of conflict begins. That's one of the things. Dialogue is a difficult thing to do, because you have to keep all the parts of fiction going, and people emit dialogue. So do your best to keep the dialogue only for conflict between characters. I don't mean yelling at each other. I mean what one person wants coming up against what another person wants. And if there's no conflict, you don't need the scene. Because the only reason for dialogue scene is for conflict between characters. And it can be conflict. We could both want the same things, and there can still be conflict. I'm in a bar, and some guys pick me up. Say. And we both want the same thing. We both want to get together. But he wants to leave. And I want to have a little more conversation. I want to stay in the bar for a while. So there can be conflict even though we want the same thing. If anybody's ever tried to console somebody who is in a bad state, and whatever you say is wrong, it's like you want to console them and they want to be consoled, but there still is conflict because they're not doing it right. If there's no conflict, don't have dialogue, because it's just a lot of meet and greet and yakety. There's dialogue on the page is very different from dialogue in real reality, which is mostly like, hi, I'm safe, I like you, you like me, blah, 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 blah. It's basically all we're saying is we're sharing a little time, we're trying to be pleasant, and we're trying not to have conflict as much as possible. That's really what passes for conversation in regular life. On the page, you don't need it. That's not what it's for. It's about characters putting pressure on each other, and then someone wins and someone loses. Something happens as a result. the when I was starting writing, because I didn't go to an MFA program, I'm DIY. I'd read about this thing called act. You want dramatic action. You want action. So I had my characters. They'd go to a party and then they'd go to another party. And there's a lot of driving around. There's a lot of moving around and going from place to place without anything happening. But what I thought was the motion was the same thing as action. In fiction, all action means dramatic action. And dramatic action is not people moving around. It is one person coming up against another person, and each of them wants something different, and they're putting pressure on each other. And then what happens, one person wins, one person loses. And that then moves the story forward. So ask yourself, do I need this dialogue? When you have people talk, it's really important to compress the dialogue, that it should represent the character in the language they use, should represent who they are. And imagine the best actors in the world saying your lines. Every line has to be worth that salary. Say if you give, some Sean Penn, some temperamental actor, you give them lines like, what do you mean by that? I mean, is that worth the $1 million you're paying him? No. And he might walk off. He says, I don't want to say stupid shit like that. So every line has to be $1 million line. Every line emitted in dialogue has to be $1 million line, or don't say it. Anything anybody could say is a line nobody should say. What do you mean by that? No straight men. What do you mean by that? People repeating what the person just said. The ultimate recipient of all dialogue is the reader. So don't tell the reader something they already know. So repeating line, he parked across the street. You just said he parked across the street. There's no reason why the other character has to repeat that. Nobody wants to be the straight man. Every line $1 million line, and you'll find your writing is going to take off. You'll also find you write a lot less dialogue. There won't be like pages and pages if you want a cup of coffee, all that meet and greet stuff. You can narrate it up to the point where something is happening. And then what happens is conflict between characters. I think the best dialogue is written by, I'd have to say, when I teach dialogue, I'm partial to Robert Stone dialogue, Bear and His Daughter, some of the short stories, Dog Soldiers. But good dialogue is specific to each character. They say things that nobody else could say. It is about the conflict and only about the conflict. And it uses all of the tools of fiction writing. What is the best way to use curse words without going overboard in dialogue? Every line $1 million line, screw you is just not $1 million line. So it's always a sense of taste. And if you're going to use curse words in dialogue, I don't care. But the question is it $1 million line? Is it specific to that character and that one situation? If anybody else could say the line, nobody should say it. So there's a challenge for you. Let's see. I know I was talking a lot about writing kind of psychology and how to keep the rear end in the seat. How do I quiet a loud inner critic? Helena Levberg, how do I quiet a loud inner critic when writing a first draft? Tell them, it'll get better later. Let me just get this down. Just get this down. The loud inner critic. We talked about perfectionism and permission in an earlier video. If that critic's getting too loud, you need more permission. And just tell the critic, hey, I know we'll take care of this later. So don't get in my way right now. Let's have one more question, and we'll... this goes so fast, my goodness. What's one more question I can answer for you? How do you know, this is Dana Mazer, how do you know if you're giving too much information about the character or too little, especially at the beginning? That's a really good question. When you get on an airplane and you sit next to somebody and they start telling you about their divorce, okay, now I'm a novelist, I want to know about people. I'm very curious about people, generally speaking. But you know how there's like a certain point where you know that you're going to be coast to coast with this person? It's like, oh my God, they're just going to continue to talk about this divorce, and where are my headphones? So it's like, where in that interaction did you stop being interested in what they were saying about their divorce? At what point do we lose interest? Better to tell somebody slightly less than they want to know, so that they're leaning forward. Yeah. Oh, well, I'm not going to tell you any more right now. Oh, the bar's, the bar cart's here. So tell them what they need to know to understand the scene, but not too much more, so that there's still a mystery. They're still going to watch that character and see what happens. There was a question about the unreliable narrator. How soon should the reader know that they are unreliable? Same, it's Dana's still question. You can do it fairly early, because any book is think of the beginning of a book as a doorway. You're building a doorway by telling the reader it's going to be this kind of story. It's going to be this kind of book. That's what we call the contract with the reader. You walk through and then you walk through the door you built. Don't build this door and walk through somewhere else. The reader gets pissed, says, they violated their own rules. So if you're going to have an unreliable narrator, indicate to the reader, and it can be very subtle, but indicate pretty early on that this is not going to be a trustworthy person. You're going to have to doubt everything they say. Often the way you do this is you have a character, like in Joan Didion's Play It As It Lays. The character Mariah lists things that she will never do. And then immediately she starts doing them. So then you know immediately that this is, I would never pick up a guy in the vegetables section of the market. That's just déclassé. And then the next thing you do is you see them flirting with a guy in the vegetables section of the supermarket. There's your unreliable. Anybody who says, trust me, is instantly unreliable in my book. Maybe that says something about me. I am happy to have had this talk. We talked about dialogue, talked a little about unreliable narrator, and I guess we'll see you next week. Can I make next week? I think so. So stay tuned, and hope you enjoyed Writing Wednesday.